Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 100th Right and Left discussion forum. We hold our discussion forums every 2 weeks to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political discussion. Today our panel will discuss the basic differences between conservatives and liberals. When I say that, think in terms of Democrats and Republicans or the right and the left. We'll use those terms interchangeably. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, a retired senior research chemist. On his left, joining our panel for the very first time, is Joseph Gaines, retired high school history and public speaking teacher and current adjunct professor at the University of Akron. Now, Patty, I hope you agree with me on this. I think this is probably the most contentious political environment that I've ever witnessed in my many, many years, and I go back to FDR. What do you think are some of the fundamental differences, or maybe some of the reasons why it's so darn contentious?
I agree with you. I think it is extremely contentious at this point. And you know, the parties have evolved so much over the years. I mean, if you go back to the 1800s and through the early 1900s, the South was completely Democratic. Now they are just the opposite. The Democrats were those that clinged to segregation. The Republicans were not. Now, I'm not going to make the reverse of that, say that statement, but that's what's going on. I think what's happened with the parties is that both parties have moved to the extremes, the right farther to the right and the left farther to the left. And the fringe elements of the two parties are what are setting the policies that are governing our nation right now. And they differ on many, many issues. I mean, if we look at immigration, now, what the party actually feels and what the perception of the country is are really two different things. In the Republican mind, the Democrats want anybody who wants to come into the United States to come in and have automatic citizenship. The Democrats think that the Republicans don't want anybody to move into the country. But that is the...
Why would they think that?
There are some that think that, because there probably are those Republicans that do not want any immigrants. And what they're basing their opinions on is how the fringe in the other party acts. Mm-hmm. And then they, as the fringe of that party, are thinking the same thing. Global warming. The left feels that, you know, and in many cases, global warming is one of the most serious problems that we have facing this planet right now. And all steps should be taken to improve the environment. Republicans feel the opposite, that there's not enough proof. In many cases, they deny that global warming exists. And, you know, just with the recent reversal of all the EPA laws that have been done, it appears to Democrats that Republicans don't care about the environment. There are big differences on taxes. Traditionally, Republicans say that all the Democrats want to do is tax, and the Democrats say all the Republicans want to do is just cut it completely, or give at least the biggest tax breaks to the millionaires in the country and nothing for the lower class folks. Social programs. Republicans want to cut social programs. They see that as a problem, that everybody that's on welfare is lazy and doesn't want to work.
Excuse me, that's what liberals think conservatives think.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm saying that, and I have actually heard that comment. You know, and on the other case, Republicans feel that Democrats just want to give everybody money and turn it into a socialist country. And instead of giving them a hand up, they want to just give them money and that'll solve all of their problems. Healthcare. Is it a right or is it a privilege? Does everyone have a right to health care, as Democrats feel, or is it a privilege that only comes when you work?
That's what the Miss America thinks.
And that's what Miss America thinks, and actually took a lot of stink about that. Yes. Unions and big business. Democrats traditionally support unions, although some of that has changed with the latest election. And Republicans try to, in many cases, have changed states into I can't think of the word, right to work states. Right to work states where the unions aren't let go, and of course then the wages go down. Democrats feel that Republicans only want to cater to big business. And that's why, all the tax breaks that have been supported recently are going to go to that. Another big one is guns. If you look at, I very honestly do not think that most Democrats feel that there should be no guns, but Republicans feel, in many cases, because I hear it on the news, that all the Democrats want to take everybody's gun and lock it away, and nobody in the world can own one, except the police and the army, which is not the case. And Democrats feel that Republicans want everybody walking around the street with a gun, loaded gun over their arm, and extending gun rights to the mentally ill. Oh wait, they just did do that, didn't they? So those are some of the differences that were. Sorry about that one. Those are some of the differences.
It came loaded for bear.
Yeah,
I know. I hope you're noting all this
Man, I'm
stuff.
telling you, I'm gonna need a little help.
those are just some of the issues.
Yeah, I know. And
Where to start?
just pick a spot.
Go.
Well, first I want to congratulate you, John, for doing this. I've enjoyed every program, and to do the 100th program, I think I've only missed a few. But this is a good exercise for everyone, and I think what's missing in the political discussion today is compromise.
Right.
It's become a dirty word.
Our
It's
governor
not-
can't even say it.
Yeah, you can't have
He will not say
everybody. You can't have a win-win for everybody. Someone has to lose, and I would agree. I don't disagree with Patty's take on some of the big issues that we face, and her observation that the alt-left and the alt-right have pretty much taken over the two parties. I think it was just the other day, if this is true, you never know with fake news anymore, but Rahm Emanuel sat down in an interview and basically said that the Democratic Party had left the middle class behind. And the Democratic Party used to be the champion of the middle class. And that's where a lot of these stereotypes would come in about the rich Republicans wanting to put it to the middle class working union member. So there's a lot of work that can be done. And when you look at the issues, on the face of the issue, I think there can be compromise. On the gun issue, I don't believe that you need to be able to walk around with a bazooka. I certainly don't want people that are mentally ill. But unfortunately, when we have certain states that are democratically run, we see an overreach. Having been raised in New Jersey, I have family that live in New Jersey, you can't get a gun. To get a shotgun, it's about a 6-month process. My brother just went through the process because he joined a clay sporting type of skeet shooting thing, like a Hill and Dale.
Yeah.
And wanted to buy a regular, I think it was a 20 gauge over-under shotgun. And it took him 6 months to get the permission to even go in and look. You need a license on top of a license on top of a license. So, there are some things there that, get people on the right a little bit concerned. But there's room, I think, for compromise there. We just have to take some of that invectiveness out of the air. I don't have a problem with the folks with global warming. I think it's a little bit funny that the inconvenient truths that Mr. Gore was prophesying about haven't come to fruition, but I'm not going to throw out the scientists at NASA. I'm not going to throw out some of these things, but I think we just need a little more of a measured approach to it. We don't solve that by just taxing the wealthy countries to help the other countries that haven't been able to have their own industrialized revolution. So there are some conservative answers to the issues that Patty has brought up, but I think there's room for compromise. We just have to get to that point. We can't always have it our way. And unfortunately, we see it playing out now. Case in point, 3 or 4 months ago, the Russians were our buddies. Let's not forget that Mitt Romney was laughed off the stage when he said that Russia was our main geopolitical foe.
He was ridiculed.
He was
by
ridiculed
Obama,
by that.
yeah.
And Mr. Obama made a fool of him right there on stage when he said, in effect, hey, Mitt, you know, the 80s are calling. They want your diplomacy back, whatever that quote was.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, you know, if you go to a Russian tea room and have tea, you're conspiring with the Russians. You know, there was very little done when Mr. Putin went in and decided that he needed a port and went into Georgia and some of those other countries. You know, so I find it a little disingenuous when we start talking about some of these things that in 1 minute they were our buddies, the next minute now they're the worst that you can possibly be, and Mr. Trump and all that kind of stuff, and I don't want to go there with him. But I believe that we can have a discussion and there can be compromise reached, but each party needs to give up their sacred cow.
Ron, where are you on compromise?
Generally for it. Echo Bryan's first comments. This has been a fantastic thing. It's a great way to keep the cognitive juices flowing for an old guy like me, you know, because I'd sit at home and watch TV, you know, what the heck. But now I get to do a little research. I think it's easy to overgeneralize in this process, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody.
Right.
But I at least try not to.
Patty
you know.
agrees with you.
No, I mean, I am too.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Everybody
But it seems to, without respect really to getting into too many details, I think as a liberal, my philosophy is that private industry and generally folks are not really willing to do some of the things socially particularly that need to be done, and that it's necessary for government to step in and take a hand on this, and that I see the Republicans in Congress fighting this tooth and nail, trying to get rid of the EPA. Recently, there was one back on global warming. Recently, there was legislation brought up to remove the regulations on the oil and gas industry for capturing and controlling the evolution of methane. Now, methane is a very bad global warming gas, much worse than CO2. And Republicans fought that. Fortunately, it didn't pass. The regulations are still in place, but you know, there are regulations and they can be removed. So it seemed to me that, and again, it's an overgeneralization, but I think the liberals look at the Republicans as somewhat mean-spirited. They're really willing to take away sociological benefits, food stamps for children, aid to dependent mothers, all that sort of thing, on the grounds that it just isn't cost effective. And it looks to me that, as a liberal, that business in general is certainly very good at maximizing profits for their stockholders, and that's their job. But the problem is with what their effect might be on the environment, like the methane thing, is pretty much overlooked or considered not important in that mind, and it just falls out. And again, that's an overgeneralization that business people fend on the Republican side, and you know, so that they become guilty of that in the liberal eyes. And so, without really getting too much into specifics here, and you've called out a number of them, and John always gives us a nice list of things to look at and ponder, and we can agree or disagree. Certainly, in my time here, over the 100 things, and again, I haven't been able to get to all of them either, I've learned a lot, and I've modified my my thoughts in some cases and solidified them in others.
Have you really?
Absolutely. I'm more in favor of gun control than ever, since I know that Bryan carries one. So,
Well, Joe, I've been waiting 2 weeks to find out how you feel about some of these things.
So have I. Well, first off, I want to thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I think you really said a lot that I totally agree with a lot that's been said here. I think one of the things that's happened is that compromise has become well, we used to compromise. We used to get along, try to, because we knew that the reason was for the betterment of the people. It was in the 1960s when civil rights was a big issue, and if we didn't compromise, we wouldn't have the solutions that we've had or the situations we have today. Civil rights bills wouldn't have been passed. Lyndon Johnson had to go out and get a lot of help from the Republican Party. Everett Dirksen was certainly not, a liberal by any means, but he knew that the reason was that civil rights was important, and civil rights was an important issue that had to be clarified. And he worked with Johnson to do that, and other Republicans did that. I mean, Barry Goldwater was considered to be an ultra-conservative, but if you look back at his record, when it came to gay rights and other things, he was certainly not what would be called a conservative. He opened it up in Arizona and in his state, and there's.
But he did vote against the Civil Rights Act of '64.
He might have, yeah. But what I'm saying is, but that's
yeah.
We don't compromise anymore because it's become them and us. It's become, you used a good term, there's meanness now.
Yeah.
I mean, we name drop. You can't turn on the news while hearing, I hate to even say Republican or a conservative say something bad about Obama. Obama did this or that. Well, let's move on.
We have moved on. We're saying it about Trump now.
Well, but he's in the position. The thing was, what bothered me the most was when President Obama was elected, there was people that came out and said we're not going to allow him to move on.
Yeah.
We're not going to let him. Even if he's right, we're stopping him. Well, how can you do that? How can you stop somebody if you agree with his policies just because he's a different political party or because he's more liberal than your ideas? That bothered me to no end. It still does. Yeah. And when you get to like President Trump, which I feel that we should give him all the respect due, and I mean that sincerely. It bothers me that he's used the issue of the media. The media is against him. Well, the media tries to come out, and I don't think the media is against anybody. I feel that the media is basically for giving the news, what is happening. I really do. We interpret it that way because we want to see it that way. We want to see it negative. I mean, I think somebody said we generalize too much, and I think you're right. I mean, I did it too. Like Obama's a good example. I would generalize him when they would come out and say, something bad about him. Well, that's the media attacking him again. It's not necessarily. They have the right to their opinion. We have a right to opinion. We have the right to views. We have the right to compromise. But when I say compromise, I mean we have the right to work for the benefit of the public in general. And to do that, we have to compromise. One issue I want to talk about a little bit here was gun control. It worries me because, I think Patty said it. We got this idea that the Democrats or liberals want to get rid of everybody's guns. In fact, I went to the Republican convention, and the issue there was Hillary is going to take all of our guns. She had no intention of doing that. Yeah. But at the same point, I don't think Republicans have every intention of walking around with a bazooka. But we need some kind of controls so guns aren't in the wrong hands. We need some kind of controls so that we know that it's not the easiest thing to do. It's just to buy a gun. Anybody can buy a gun. We need some kind of controls, some compromise there. And we won't compromise because, you liberals want to take all of our guns away. No, you conservatives want everybody to carry a gun. No, there's got to be a middle ground.
I think it's something like 80-90% of the country feels that we should have better rules as far as background checks.
Right, I agree.
And that's something, the problem I see too, because I mentioned about the fringe, part of the parties now. If you don't go along with that fringe part of the party, you'll be primaried and you'll lose your job. So we see that the middle no longer exists, that the independent voice is no longer heard in Congress.
Well, we never hear the word central anymore.
No. And that's what we need, those centrists that aren't saying, I have to believe this or I can't be a member of this party.
Joe Lieberman.
Yeah.
There's a man that's very well respected. You talk about some issues. I don't think you can bring up abortion on the left. And if you don't go with the party line, you're done. And there are some other issues, when you start labeling people deniers and science deniers and everything. I think that if we were to sit down here and solve the problems of Wadsworth, we would be able to come up with a compromise that everybody could live with. But the minute someone becomes dogmatic and hardens their position, and it's only going to be this, that's when you start getting that. And you know, once again, we have fringes. Each side has a fringe, and we've let that fringe sort of take over. And you know, it's with the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
Yeah. Patty mentioned the fact that some people find it very difficult to draw a distinction between immigration and illegal immigration, that everybody on the right is just against immigration. We did the same thing with the difference between health care and health care insurance. And for as long as I can remember, Republicans are accused of wanting to give tax breaks to the wealthy, and we've never defined what wealthy was. And that when you think about the top 10% paying 70% of all the income taxes, and the bottom 50% not paying any, I think it's time that we come up with some definitions. For instance, if the top 10%, 70% of all the income tax is not enough, how much is? Should it be 85?
We did talk once about the possibility of a flat tax.
Yes.
Where everybody kind of pays a share. We kind of concluded it wasn't going to work.
No, because half of the people aren't paying anything.
Well,
No one
but a
wants-
lot of
only
those-
an income tax.
But a lot of those people that aren't paying anything are retired seniors. They're making $10,000 a year, and they don't have enough money to pay out an extra large amount.
But what
I
is
think
it-
one of the concerns, though, if you look at Trump's tax plan, the biggest breaks are going to the top group. And
That's the only people that are paying taxes. I mean, what?
No, I'm paying
no,
taxes.
I'm paying taxes, and I'm not going to get that. Matter of fact, I
You're
could end up
wealthy.
paying more.
If you're paying taxes, you're wealthy.
And I could end up paying more, but that top group will be paying a lot less, and the idea is that trickle-down economics theory, which
That worked. It created
not
a
work.
It doesn't. I don't necessarily think that it did work.
I don't think it did.
I
It
haven't seen
created
it
the
work.
longest economic expansion in history.
We've
Well,
seen a boom just in the last 4 months because business is more optimistic.
Yeah.
Until the last 2 days, it just dropped.
Well,
Boy, it dropped.
Yeah, but it came. I mean, if you're going to follow it day to day, you'll never sleep at night. But
That's
you
Well,
know,
we had booms. We had booms during the Clinton administration. We've had booms during the
Right.
Obama administration. So I'm not going to say this boom that we've got right now is because of the president we now have.
well, and Bill Clinton was he was a compromiser. He was a
He
wheeler
was.
dealer, you
Yeah.
know,
He
and,
was,
and
yeah.
he was able to get things through because he wasn't so dogmatic.
And he took credit for ending welfare as we know it.
Exactly, and
He
we
was
can't
very-
forget that.
He was very
you know?
middle of the road.
Well,
Right.
you have to
Right.
think sometimes of you hate to agree with this, but we need politicians. Somebody knows the politics of
Mm-hmm.
how to run things and how to get along with people. Trump is not a politician. I mean, in many ways,
No,
I think
he's not.
he tries, and he is in some ways, but he doesn't come from that background.
Right.
He doesn't know Washington, and all he knows is what he wants to know.
Real estate.
Well, one of the problems with
yeah.
politicians is when there's a problem, they think they're supposed to fix it. And when they do, they usually make it worse.
But see, we don't have answers anymore. We got more questions.
We do. Sometimes it's best to leave a problem solve itself.
Well,
Don't you
in some
think?
cases it can, but
Well,
in
it
some cases
depends.
we needed to
If
do
there's
it.
if the water is tainted in Flint, Michigan,
right.
to the point that people can't drink it, then you need
That's
to
a
do
great
something
point.
about
Great
that.
point.
So
Right.
there are problems that need to be
Yeah,
solved.
and we don't need to politicize it.
Right.
And how did
So
the water get
let's
that
talk.
way?
Maybe
Right.
we talk about the social issues. You know, we had that program on the Great Society, and this was going to be the be all end all. It hasn't. So why do we continue doing the same
And there's
thing?
compassionate conservatism.
You know, exactly. What's wrong? What's wrong with getting the federal government out of it and just block grant it to the state of Ohio, to the city of Wadsworth, down to the Salvation Army, to the people that really have boots on the ground? That's the problem that I've seen is that when we have this centralized government, which seems to be what the Democrats want to run everything, they can't really do that.
You know, the concern there too, though, is on some issues. For example, with the healthcare, one of the plans is let's move it to the states. So Ohio will set up
Right.
theirs, Pennsylvania, and the complaint to that, and it's been mentioned at the town halls, is, in other words, I only get good health care if I live in Michigan, but if I move to Indiana, I can't get it. That's
But there could be ways
But-
to, and
but
I
that has
think
to be
Well,
done
that
on
way
a
comes out of
national
central
level.
government.
what comes out of the Senate is going to be something that everybody can live with. I firmly believe that, you know, everybody talks about all of a sudden now we have all these people that just love Obamacare. Well, you might have coverage, but you can't afford to use it.
Yeah.
When your deductible is $5,000 or $8,000 or $10,000, you can't tell me you're going to go.
So is the new policy better?
I think any improvement on what we've had or what they put in place will be better for everyone.
But an
24
improvement, but what they're
million
putting in
people
is an improvement.
I'm waiting to see what
Don't know
comes
yet.
out of the Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but-
I wonder
you know.
what that means, an improvement.
Well, I do too, in a sense that
When you
more health care, better health care, cheaper health care. But the thing is, we were led to believe that in many cases the Senate was going to already have something in place when the election was over, and they would come in and hear Obamacare was bad, it was nasty, it was wrong, so we're going to put this new one in. It hasn't happened.
Right.
And the new one has been voted down by the Republican Party also.
Well, and I think one of the things too, what hasn't really happened with the Obamacare is the Cadillac tax. We haven't, we didn't get to that stage yet. So the insurance that you have through the school system, and I'm sure the insurance that Joe
have
has
also.
through
Yeah,
the
the
insurance,
same, yeah.
that is going to cost 30% more because that's considered a Cadillac plan. The city is faced with that type of an issue as well. When your premium, it's just a tax, it's a fine.
What kind of
Yeah.
plan does the Senate and the Congress have, or the Congress itself?
You know, to be honest with you, I haven't
It's
really
a Rolls
delved into
Royce
it.
plan.
You know,
I know it's even better than
It's
that.
Obamacare, though.
Right.
yeah.
Why don't we have that?
So you know, when you look at
Which
the
covers
different plans,
pre-existing conditions, yes.
yeah, I mean, you know, those are things that need to be worked out. I'm sure there can be some compromise there, but we can't just say it was working because it wasn't.
Well, the clock is not on our side right now. This is an interesting discussion. And I think one of the things that we agree on that we never got around to talking about is that both the left and the right believe things about each other that are just not true.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
true.
So we'll close with this quote. The challenges of change are always hard. It is important that we begin to unpack those challenges that confront this nation and realize that we each have a role that requires us to change and become more responsible for our own futures. Hillary Clinton. Thank you very much.
Thank you.